This is The Quiet End, and tonight I'll tell you a story titled The Roof Walker. Let's begin. It started as whispers, carried on the drafty corners of downtown, past cracked brick walls and through the flicker of dim sodium streetlights. The Roof Walker, they called it. Nobody quite agreed on what it was. It was an outline, they said, a figure impossibly tall, almost skeletal, its limbs longer than they had any right to be. It paced the rooftops, silent as the dead, only glimpsed under the cover of night. Some claimed it lingered above closed shops or hunched over crumbling chimneys. Others swore they'd seen its misshapen shadow, stretching impossibly long under the pale light of the moon. Caleb didn't think much of it at first. He'd heard stranger city legends, but then he met the bartender. Caleb had only stopped at this downtown dive, the Rusted Lantern, to charge his drone and grab a quick beer. The bartender, a wiry man named Ernest, seemed like a skeptic. That changed when one of the regulars brought up the Roof Walker as a joke. Ernest's hand stopped mid-polish, the rag frozen against a cloudy pint glass. "It's no joke," Ernest murmured, voice low and tight. "I've seen it." Nobody laughed. The man's face, pale and drawn, told more than his words. Caleb, always curious about anything unusual, leaned forward. "What did you see?" Ernest glared at him, but his gaze softened like he needed to unburden himself. He lowered his voice as if the thing might hear him. "It was taller than anything human should be," Ernest said. "Its steps were wrong, like it didn't understand how walking was supposed to work. And its eyes—" He trailed off, trembling. "What about its eyes?" Caleb pressed. "There weren't any." Ernest swallowed hard. "Just two wide gaping holes where they should have been, like tunnels in its skull." Then with a sudden conviction he added, "I ain't drinking after dark anymore, not with that thing out there." It was enough to plant the seed in Caleb's mind. Something about the man's quivering tone felt too raw, too vivid to be a lie. By the time Caleb had finished his beer, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The legend, the silhouette, those void-like holes. He decided to launch his drone that very night. Curiosity dragged Caleb deeper into the story than he cared to admit. Each night after work, he prepped his drone like clockwork, checking the camera, calibrating the controls, and charging the battery. The first few nights, his drone hovered silently over the roofs of downtown, recording stretches of peeling shingles, rusted vent pipes, and the occasional skitter of a bird. Dull, unremarkable. By the fourth night, even Caleb started questioning his efforts. "Waste of time," he muttered, his pulse slow and steady as the drone glided over the jagged roofline. Then something shifted. A movement too deliberate, too wrong. He leaned closer to the monitor. There it was. Across the screen, a spindly figure climbed over the edge of a rooftop, its frame grotesquely thin, a distorted silhouette against the moonlight. Caleb's pulse spiked. He adjusted the drone's altitude, inching closer. The closer he got, the more the figure defied reason. Its limbs were stretched beyond any human proportion, bending at sharp, unnatural angles as it walked. It looked like it was moving in reverse, as though it didn't fully understand gravity. When the drone hovered barely 10 feet above, the figure stopped. Caleb felt a knot tightening in his chest as the thing slowly turned. Its face, or what should have been its face, was a smooth mask of bone-like hollows. And then, those eyes. Glowing, empty sockets, burning faintly like dying embers. Caleb didn't realize he'd stopped breathing until the monitor went to static. No warning, just an abrupt blast of white noise, as if the drone had been swallowed by the night itself. For the first time, Caleb wasn't sure that curiosity was worth it. But he also knew he couldn't walk away. Not now. Caleb spent the following days with his eyes glued to his computer screen, replaying the footage over and over. He couldn't let it go. The static that consumed the recording in the end felt like a cruel joke, but what came before, that part was clear enough. Too clear. He painstakingly enhanced the video, isolating frames, stretching the resolution, sharpening the shadows, and every time he zoomed in, he noticed something worse. The figure's face wasn't just smooth, it was warped, the faint outline of an empty, gaping mouth barely visible where a jaw should have been. Its fingers were long, jagged, claw-like appendages that curled unnaturally as they swiped at the air. Then there was the way it moved. Caleb slowed the frames down, watched, slowed them again. There was a horrifying fluidity to the creature, like its body didn't resist movement the way human limbs did. It flowed, boneless and disjointed, unnervingly confident in its grotesque elegance. That night, he started researching the Roofwalker legend obsessively. What he found made the air in his room feel heavier than it should have. Reports going back decades, maybe longer. Grainy newspaper clippings about rooftops said to be cursed. Old yellowed interviews with people who described seeing something lurking above the city lights just before someone disappeared. A dock worker in 1983. A teacher in 1969. A shoemaker, gone, not a trace, in 1946. The one consistent detail, the witness always described the same thing: spindly limbs and hollow eyes. Caleb lost track of time. Every sound outside his window made him flinch. He started checking his locks twice, his blinds 3 times. By the time he caught his reflection in the bathroom mirror, he hardly recognized himself. Pale skin, sunken eyes, paranoia leeching the life from his features. But it wasn't paranoia, was it? Even when he wasn't looking at the footage, he could feel it. The intense, looming sensation that someone, or something, was staring back. Caleb knew he shouldn't, but as the days passed, the temptation became unbearable. The footage, the stories, the feeling of being watched, it was clawing at him. He had to know. So armed with his drone, a flashlight, and an anxious determination, Caleb climbed the rusted fire escape behind the rusted lantern, pulling himself onto the rooftops. The night was unnervingly quiet. Usually the city buzzed even in its darker hours, distant honks, muffled conversations, the hum of air conditioners. But tonight, the silence gnawed at Caleb's nerves. Even his footsteps felt muted against the asphalt of the roof, as if the world itself was holding its breath. His drone went first, its small rotors cutting through the stagnant air. Caleb scanned the rooftop edges with his flashlight, the beam trembling in his grip. Nothing but crumbling bricks and peeling tar. He was starting to question his judgment when he heard it. Scraping, a jagged, grinding noise like clawed hands dragging across brittle concrete. Caleb froze, his breath sharp in the cold night. The sound grew closer, then stopped. He turned swiftly, aiming the flashlight into the darkness, and for just a moment he saw it. The Roofwalker, impossibly tall and twisted, darting from shadow to shadow with a speed that defied logic. Its limbs stretched mid-motion, pulling it across the rooftop with sickening grace. For a second, just a second, those hollow eyes caught the beam of his flashlight, reflecting an unnatural faint glow before vanishing into the dark. Caleb reacted instinctively. He didn't think, couldn't process. The flashlight clattered from his hand as he turned and bolted for the fire escape. His drone buzzed madly somewhere behind him, its controls forgotten in his panic. His lungs burned as his boots hit the iron steps, desperate to reach the ground. Just as he reached for the last rung, he heard it. Laughter. Not human laughter, but something high-pitched, shrill, and fragmented, like it didn't quite understand the sound it was making. It echoed behind him, chilling and cruel. Caleb reached the alley and collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. But even in the safety of the street, that awful broken laugh lingered in his head, woven into the silence. Caleb's life began to dissolve into a waking nightmare. Sleepless nights turned into restless days, his mind trapped in a loop of the encounter. He tried telling himself it was over, that he'd escaped, but the illusion quickly crumbled. The first sign came 2 nights after the rooftop incident. Caleb had been sitting in darkness, staring blankly at his drone's broken video feed. Then he noticed them, streaks across his living room window, claw-like scratches etched deep into the glass, as though something had tried to reach inside. That wasn't all. Every night since, when the city quieted and his apartment grew still, faint tapping sounds would rise from the ceiling above him. Deliberate, irregular taps. Caleb would lie motionless in his bed, heart pounding as he tried to convince himself it was nothing more than the building settling, but he knew better. Deep down he knew. His friends noticed the change first. Richard, who grabbed coffee with Caleb every Monday, remarked on how pale he had grown, how he flinched at shadows like a dog expecting to be beaten. Caleb brushed it off, muttering something about late work hours, but the concerned looks lingered. Then came the hallucinations, or were they? Each flicker of movement outside his window felt too purposeful. Every shape in the corner of his vision disappeared too quickly. Caleb wasn't sure what was real anymore. It didn't matter. The roofwalker had marked him. That was the legend's dark truth, wasn't it? It didn't just watch those who dared to see it. No, it chose them. Caleb couldn't shake the sinking realization that he'd fallen irreversibly into its gaze. The stories he'd once dismissed as folklore now felt like warnings he'd ignored too late. He searched through forums, desperate for a way out, hoping someone out there had escaped it. What he found instead was dread. Every thread ended the same: silence. And each night the tapping grew louder. Caleb was done hiding, or maybe he was too far gone to realize how reckless he'd become. Either way, there was no turning back. Desperation clawed at him, the weight of unanswered questions and relentless paranoia pushing him to act. He powered up his drone in the early hours of the morning when the world felt most alien. The whirring rotors filled his apartment as he steadied his shaking hands on the controls. This would be the final flight. The drone ascended higher than it ever had, its camera scanning the vast expanse of rooftops. Caleb's screen flickered with the shattered textures of chimneys and vents, each corner more sinister than the last. And then it stopped. The roofwalker. It stood there, completely still, unnaturally tall, limbs jagged as dried twigs. It didn't run this time, didn't dart into shadow. Instead, it faced the camera directly, its hollow, faintly glowing eyes locked onto Caleb's screen. Caleb froze, his breath catching in his throat. The figure didn't just watch, it responded. Slowly, tortuously, it stepped from the roof's edge. Its long arms hung at unnatural angles as its body swayed, boneless yet deliberate. Caleb adjusted the drone's view, but the creature kept pacing toward the edge of the building, toward him. He couldn't look away. The feed showed it begin its descent. No ladder, no path, just limbs bending impossibly, clawing into solid stone. It was climbing down toward his building. He felt the cold sweat roll down his back, his instinct screaming at him to run, but his body wouldn't move. The drone's feed crackled, static weaving through the image. Caleb tried to bring it down, desperate for control, but it was too late. The final thing he saw was the creature's head, twisting and jerking mid-motion as the screen filled with static. Then, darkness. The drone was gone. His apartment was deafeningly silent, save for his own ragged breaths. The world felt unnervingly still, but Caleb knew better now. It wasn't still, it was waiting. Caleb piled his furniture against the door, shaking as he locked the windows and shut the blinds. The tapping was louder now, irregular and sharp, rattling the walls like skeletal fingers tracing every inch of his apartment. His flashlight felt heavier in his hands than it should, but he clung to it like a lifeline. The lights flickered once, then twice. He cursed under his breath, backing into the corner of the room, and then, with a final shudder, they went out. Total darkness swallowed him whole. Caleb's breathing came fast and shallow, his ears straining for any sound. That's when he heard it, the breathing. Heavy, labored, inconsistent. It wasn't his. It came from above, right above. The ceiling groaned under the pressure, a torturous creak as something shifted on the other side. Caleb clutched his flashlight tighter, his knees buckling as plaster began to crack. He screamed a fractured plea to the silence, but it didn't matter. The roofwalker answered. With a deafening crash, the ceiling collapsed inward, wood splintering and dust choking the air. The flashlight beam caught only glimpses. A clawed hand, impossibly long limbs folding as they squeezed into the cramped room, hollow eyes burning like distant fires. The figure was gargantuan, filling the space as though the walls weren't there at all. Caleb tried to run, but the thing was faster. The claws closed around him, jerking him upward like a doll. His scream sliced through the night, abrupt and raw, before the sound was cut short. The shattered ceiling revealed nothing but darkness above as the creature dragged him onto the rooftops. By morning, the city woke to another disappearance. Caleb's apartment stood empty, the room eerily still save for the wreckage littering the floor. And up above, where the dawnlight touched the rooftops, the legend walked again. So tell me, dear listener, the next time you hear a tap on your window or a creak above your head, will you dare look, or will you pray it isn't looking back? Subscribe for more chilling tales, and hit the bell to stay in the dark. See you at the next quiet end.